Hello fellow knitters, welcome to another knit video. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can knit the 2x2 rib knit stitch pattern. This is actually really easy to do, so let's get started. For this project, you are going to need to know how to cast on, knit, purl, and bind off your work. Now for this project, you are going to cast on multiples of 4 plus 2. Before we dive into today's stitch tutorial, I'm excited to share a project idea that will grow with you as you learn, the Knit Patchwork Blanket Project. Here's how it works. Every time we explore a new stitch on this channel, you will knit a square or piece using that stitch. Over time, these squares will come together to form a one-of-a-kind blanket, showcasing all the skills you've learned. For each stitch, you can knit a square that's roughly the same size. You'll always cast on roughly about 30 stitches or whatever stitch count you've decided, and you will grow your project up to that size. So, for example, if you cast on 30 stitches, you are going to knit 30 rows. Now, everything that we end up doing in this project not will always equal out to 30 exactly. Sometimes there'll be 31 or there might be 29. That's okay. That's part of how this project is going to come together. You'll always want to use the same style of yarn, so medium weight yarn if you're using that, and the same size of knitting needles. But feel free to adjust the size based on your preferences. The fun part? There's no need for your blanket to be perfect, unified, or symmetrical. The mix of textures, patterns, and even size will make it uniquely yours. A patchwork for your knitting journey. Think of this project as a way to practice new stitches without pressure. Each square is a standalone accomplishment, and over time you'll have a beautiful functional blanket that tells the story of your growth as a knitter. With all that out of the way, let's continue on now that you have all of your stitches cast on. For row 1, you are going to do a repeat of knit 2, purl 2 until you get to the last 2 stitches, which you are going to knit 2. So row 1 is setting up the framework for everything that shall follow, which is actually kind of neat if you really think about it. So again, the repeat for row 1 is going to be knit 2, purl 2, and then the last 2 stitches you are going to knit. Once you finish row 1, you are going to turn your work and start on row 2. Fancy that. So for row 2, you are going to do a repeat of purl 2, knit 2, and the last 2 stitches you are going to purl. So what ends up giving the rib stitch pattern its effect is you are purling the purls and knitting the knits. Now I know what you're going to say is I finished off my last row knitting 2, and that's true, but when you turn your work to face you, wrong side in this case, it is actually the stitches are now facing you are purls because that's what's on the opposite side of a knit, is a purl. So that's how this pattern ends up being formed. And all you're going to have to do to continue on is repeat row 1 and row 2 until you end up getting the desired size for your project. And that's it. Now if you're following along with the Patchwork Blanket Project, you are not going to end up knitting to your desired row. This is row 30 for me that I'm finishing off. Once that's done, you're going to go ahead and bind off your work. To bind off my work, I'm going to do the purl 2 together bind off method, which literally is just the way it sounds. You're going to purl 2 together, and the loop that ends up on your working needle, so the one on your right hand side if you are right-handed and that's how you're doing this, you're going to slip that back onto the other ones with all of the stitches, and then you're going to purl that together with the following stitch, and so on and so forth until you get to the last stitch, then you bind it off. Now I do have a more in-depth video for how to do this bind off method. I'll leave that down in the description below if you are curious. There really is no right or wrong way of how you want to bind off your work. I'm just trying something different than the last video, so no shame in that. But once that is all done, congratulations, you have finished square number 2 for our patchwork blanket. Now don't worry that this is going to look really small or whatnot. It'll stretch out to the size that we need once we start sewing everything together, which is going to be in a couple videos from now just because I want to make sure we have a few before we get started on that. But if you want to jump the gun and go ahead and stitch this to the last pattern that we did, feel free, no worries. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button so you can follow along with the Patchwork Blanket tutorials. I look forward to seeing you in the next knitting video. Bye for now.